Hello everyone, I'm Jordana Van of Ravenlight Holistic Healing and welcome to Orca, also known as Killer Whale, as a totem. As always, I want to remind you guys that while I really want to create the most comprehensive examination of an animal's spiritual wisdom that I can, I also like to keep these videos under a certain length. So while this is going to be a lot of info, I've left out a few things for the sake of brevity. If you're wanting the additional information that might be relevant to you, you're welcome to schedule a professional session with me by visiting my website. I would be delighted to fill you in. Also, you guys can hear my cat. I'm in a different room today. You notice the different background, and he's not really happy about being left out. So any aggravated kitty noises, that's Tully. Anyway, so scientists recognize quite a few different kinds of orcas, with the biggest difference between these types being the nature of their preferred prey. So some primarily eat fish, others focus on marine animals, some will haul a moose off a beach if they can get close enough, but I've chosen to make this video about orca as a totem in general. So I'm not addressing any specific subspecies. This means that this info is intended to speak to all orca people, but as always, if you've identified your orca as being a particular kind of orca and you'd like to learn additional information about what that means for you, again, you can schedule a session with me. So let's get started. First, even though orcas are known as killer whales, they aren't actually whales, but the largest species of dolphin. These guys have the ability to feel things really, really deeply, but they don't usually let their emotions run them. So this is actually what all of us are striving for. We want to be able to experience the full gamut of emotions, but still act from a grounded, balanced place. The emotional piece here is the result of the orca being a sea creature that spends its entire life in the water. The spiritual component of water is emotional experience. So anytime we're talking about a water dweller, we're going to be talking about emotions. Also, I want to insert a little side note here. When there's an issue with our emotions, it tends to manifest as a physical ailment. And when orcas around, or other sea creatures, these issues tend to have something to do with the way in which our bodies use water. So when you have a shortage of natural tears, for example, those of you guys who experience issues with dry eyes, it's because you aren't actually letting yourselves feel your feelings. What you see, eyes, what you see around you is upsetting you in some way, whether this upset stems from your job, your relationship with friends and family members, your neighborhood or social organizations, or even the world at large. But you repress how you feel about it and insist on viewing things dispassionately. So the mark of a person with dry eye issues is I'm not going to let myself feel about any of the things I see because I don't think I should feel upset. I would feel guilty if I were to feel upset. I am afraid what I would do if I let myself feel upset. I'm afraid of how people will see me if I feel upset. Or there is no reason for me to feel whatever it is that you feel because it is what it is and I can't do anything about it. Similarly, orca may be wanting you to look at why you're experiencing dry mouth or issues with the kidneys or the bladder. I'm not going to go into how to repair these issues here, or we would be here all day, although it is a favorite topic of mine. But if you're experiencing any of these things, the first thing to ask yourself is, what am I refusing to let myself feel and why? So as a sea creature, orca people, at least the mature ones, the ones who've really been working the lessons and growing up, are unafraid to feel what they feel, and their emotions are very, very strong. They let themselves feel sad when they're sad, angry when they're angry, blissful when they're overwhelmed with joy or beauty. When you let yourself feel your feelings, knowing that feelings are not facts, but simply your response to your beliefs about a situation, even sadness can have a certain kind of pleasant high to it. So here you have a person who does not cut themselves off from life. Whatever their experience is at the moment, they meet it without any sort of shield or veil. This creates a very intense relationship with the world. Orca people feel oneness with all that is naturally, where others might have to meditate like crazy to get there, or they don't get there at all. And they feel transcendent joy at viewing a sunset or hearing a piece of music or watching an autumn leaf fall from a tree. Similarly, when they hurt exquisitely. The whole gauntlet of human experience is valid for them. Water is also the element of daydreaming, imagination, creative flow, and so these are the sort of individuals who can channel their emotions and daydreams into creative projects, especially music, which is often an intrinsic talent for them, or painting, especially watercolor or other water-based paints, for what I hope are obvious reasons. In some individuals, this kind of intense emotional high all the time makes it hard for them to live in the real world. They spend so much time lost in pure spirit that they have a tough time creating lasting, meaningful relationships, or doing everyday things like paying their bills or remembering to put gas in the car. The physical's neglected. Their bodies fall apart because they're not eating or moving, or they never have enough physical focus to create anything lasting. But the coloration of the orca, that black and white, lends to orca people a certain groundedness that prevents this spin-off into this spiritual emotional ether. Orcas are mostly black and white, so it sounds a bit simple, but the universe really loves symbolism. And the black and white coloration of the orca creates people whose perspective is very black and white. Something is or it isn't. These guys don't like complications, and they don't like drama. They like truth. So you know how some people like to stir things up just to see how people will react or get attention or make life interesting? These are the same folks who will exaggerate like crazy or make up stories because they love the drama. Orca people don't typically do this. They like simple, ordered, grounded rules. Drama, which is by its definition needless, is a waste of time and energy to them. So this is why Orca people can feel so deeply and yet not emote all over the place or all over everyone else. They let themselves feel what they feel, and they let themselves see the truth that those feelings are speaking about, even when the truth is painful. So even though they live in an emotional world, they allow those emotions to inform their real world existence. This is very, very different from those super emotional people who let themselves feel deeply, but then also let themselves get carried away by those emotions, regardless of what those emotions are trying to tell them. They act without understanding exactly why they are acting. Orca people look at the truth these emotions represent and then act from that space. This tends to mean that Orca people are going to act inconsistently or in ways that other people don't understand. So one day they may seem really cold, the other times extremely compassionate. For example, where most others might lash out with anger or seek retribution for a perceived wrong, the Orca person might just effortlessly forgive and walk away. There's no internal need to hold on to the anger because they see and accept the truth it represents. On the other hand, an Orca person might spot a person starving to death in the street and just keep right on walking. This isn't because they're cruel or purposely ignoring the other person's suffering, but their higher self has told them they need to keep walking for some reason totally known only to the universe, and they're not motivated by pity. On another day, they might instead stop and give that person their life savings. So they don't react to stimuli in a consistent, predictable fashion because they are looking for the truth of a situation, not getting wrapped up in how it initially looks or feels. Now, my poor cat. The orcas are extremely intelligent creatures. They're quick learners, flexible thinkers, which makes them excellent problem solvers. By extension, Orca people are also excellent problem solvers, and they really enjoy the experience of finding out how something works, figuring out a new or better way to do it. Intellectual exercise is absolutely vital for them. If they aren't frequently engaged in something that stimulates the thinking portion of their brain, they're going to experience depression. So if you're an Orca person who's feeling depressed, it's entirely possible you're bored. Whatever you're doing has become so old hat that it no longer stimulates you, in which case you need to take a serious look at your situation and either find a way to reinvigorate it or do something different. Boredom is often a sign that we're ready to change. One of the places we most clearly witness the orca's intelligence is in the way that they hunt. Not only do orcas use different strategies for different prey, which maximizes their success, they hunt in groups, just like wolves, which is one of the reasons they're actually called the wolves of the sea. Similarly, Orca people thrive in group activities when they're surrounded by those of like mind. it's invigorating for them to work together to solve a problem. These guys can really benefit from competitive sports or other activities that involve strategy, cooperation, and team spirit. Now, orcas are what are known as apex predators. They are at the top of the food chain in the ocean, so nothing else hunts them except for man, and we are not going to talk about whale hunting here. Orcas are strong, they're aggressive, they're super smart. When you come into this world strong and smart and with more drive than most others, it can be kind of tough to understand the point of view of those who are still learning strength or developing the ability to think creatively, or who are terrified to stand up for themselves or go after what they want. 2, that black and white coloration makes orca people pretty stubborn. Again, they don't like the grays. You know, in their mind, things are black and white. They are one thing or another. So they don't have a lot of patience for those who insist on getting lost in all those grays and can't look at what's really going on in a situation. So orca people tend to be blunt, or just speak their beliefs directly, and this doesn't earn them a lot of friends when they're young. Orca people are actually deeply compassionate. They don't want to hurt others, but they just don't see why you don't get it. So there's usually a bit of a learning curve here. They have to have the experience over and over of watching what happens when they speak truth before they learn to be a bit more diplomatic. They're not intended to learn to lie. Okay, the truth is the truth. They need to be able to speak it proudly. But they can be learn to be a bit more sensitive about how they deliver it. The other part of having a predator as a totem, whether it's orca or snake or red-tailed hawk or whatever, is that even if you yourself are still developing confidence, you still give off a confident vibe. You also tend to be a determined individual who's going to throw your whole heart into getting what you want. You're the anti-victim. So your energy tells others, I believe that I can have what I want and I'm going to get it somehow. This is very, very different from the victim mentality that is so pervasive these days, in which everyone is always accusing someone else of keeping them down or complaining that life has given them insurmountable, crummy circumstances. It may sound a bit backwards, but there is a great deal of comfort in being a victim. When you're a victim, nothing is your fault. And when you're a victim, nothing you can do is going to make it any better. The definition of being a victim is a lack of control. So you don't actually feel the need to do anything to better yourself. You just kind of lay back and let life happen to you and blame everyone else and everything else for how it happens. The predator person's energy, which is by its nature confident, shows the victim what they lack. And this is very upsetting for the victim. When you've gotten comfy, complaining and letting others take responsibility for every aspect of your life, which may not be a happy life, but feels safer to you than the idea of trying and failing, the last thing you want is for someone to shove you out of your comfort zone. And orca people won't just shove you out of your comfort zone just by being themselves, by really believing in their power, by speaking truth, by unabashedly feeling what they feel. They will tend to really, really rattle the self-imposed cages in which victims place themselves. So to cope, victims will either avoid them or they will try to make the orca person feel badly about themselves so that the orca person will quit projecting confidence, because that confident vibe is what makes the victim so squirmy. Bring the orca person down to their level where the misery lives. So it's probably not surprising that orca people tend to have some difficulty making friends outside of their immediate and extended family. They're just too intense, and the anti-victim mentality is just too scary. And the fact that they don't do drama or play games in relationships also makes them hard to deal with in a culture that lives for drama and takes refuge in games. You know that person who always speaks the unadulterated truth and doesn't really fit in with normal people who are always hiding what they really feel or believe? That's the orca person. Now, just like orcas are black and white, people tend to have very black and white opinions of orca people. They are either loved or they are roundly disliked. People who are attached to the victim mentality will often hate them, while those who are ready to grow and become more in touch with their personal power and seek truth will be inspired by them. As an orca person, you really just got to continuously keep in mind that how people feel about you really has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. So it's your job to just be yourself, do what you do, and let other people do what they do. Fortunately, Orca people tend to have very strong bonds with their families, which is necessary given how different they are from most other people. This is part of the reason they are usually so balanced. They grow up feeling that they have a stable, reliable group of people to rely upon if they need it. And while they may be awkward in society at large, at home they fit right in. Orcas live in tightly knit groups called pods, which usually have somewhere between 5 and 30 members. Like elephant herds, the pod is a matriarchal structure, so the oldest female calls the shots. So for those for whom Orca is a totem, it's most often the case that the most influential person in their life is their mother or grandmother, or another older female family member who loved and guided them. They may also create a relationship with someone outside their family who will play this role for them and who will come to feel like family to them. But regardless, the wisdom of an older female is usually going to have a big impact on these folks. 2, unlike many other animals where they leave their family when they reach maturity, orcas live their entire lives in the same pod into which they're born. Family members are close, and they're together almost all the time, and outsiders are not allowed. So mates don't get brought home to mama. Mating either happens within the group, which is not a great thing, and we'll talk more about why later, or mating occurs outside the group, and then the orca comes back home to have the baby, but without the mate. So if you're an orca person, you probably have a deeply rooted understanding that family comes first. And if you had to choose between your significant other and your family, your significant other would be the one who got the boot. There's also a greater incidence of orca people moving home after college, or after a separation, or not leaving home at all. This isn't laziness or lack of initiative. They just simply have this understanding that no one gets them like their family, and they're happiest there. Even when family members are dominating or tick them off, and no family is perfect, guys, they recognize that they're safe and understood there. So with this emphasis on family and togetherness, orca people can't function over the long term as loners. Being alone for a long period is positively toxic for them. Many experts believe that the discrepancy between the lifespan of an orca in captivity and one in the wild, and it's a pretty significant discrepancy, is because these are animals that need to be with others of their kind. And so isolation is physically and mentally unbearable. So for orca people, it is perfectly normal for them to spend what to others may seem like an insane amount of time with their family, or with people who play that role for them, perhaps a group of childhood friends to whom they're especially close. Now, if you're watching this video and you're thinking, oh my God, that's not me at all, I can't stand my family, I wanted to get away from them as soon as possible, Orca probably isn't one of your totems, but is a temporary spirit guide, asking you to take a look at how you feel about your family, or lack thereof. It's probably the case that you've been feeling lonely and like an outsider, and you're hungering for a group to love and support and embrace you for who you are. So you may also be harboring deep wounds stemming from feeling rejected or unsupported by your family. And so Orca would be telling you that it's time to explore those things so you can let them go. Now, while having that supportive, understanding family is a definite positive, it can also create a certain degree of blindness and stuckness that is important for Orca people to be aware of. Orcas actually have an astoundingly complex culture. Groups of orcas in different parts of the world have their own set of behaviors and preferences, and the language they speak is so different from that of groups in other parts of the world that it would be like me speaking Russian while you're speaking English. We could probably find a way to communicate through facial expressions and gestures, but we could not communicate thoughts through spoken language. So language, food preferences, hunting strategies, who it's acceptable to mate with, and even the way they have fun are all taught by the older orcas to the younger. And these rules are reinforced generation after generation. So in some ways, this is great because each unique culture is preserved, but it can also have serious consequences. Some groups of orcas are so rigid about who makes an appropriate mate that they will not mate outside their own group, which creates an inbred population with genetic defects. Unless this changes, this particular group is eventually going to die off. Other groups are so rigid about what they think that they can eat or what they're allowed to eat that they won't let themselves try eating something different when their preferred food source is scarce, so they can starve. So orcas are extremely adaptable within the confines of their culture, but when it comes to stepping outside the rules, they get stuck. So how does this apply to orca people? That tightly knit family of yours may have some pretty strict judgments about who it's appropriate for you to date or marry, what kind of leisure activities are acceptable, the way in which you speak, or even the day-to-day things like the food you eat. These judgments help preserve your family's unique culture, which is wonderful, but it can also keep you from having the kind of new and exciting experiences and meeting the kinds of new and exciting people that would make your life richer. If the orca person is going to have a blind spot, this is it. These guys can effortlessly see the truth in others, and they can usually see the truth about themselves, but when that truth has to do with a family-based rule that has outlived its uselessness or usefulness, or that contradicts what their family believes about certain other groups of people or ways of doing things, they may have a tough time letting themselves see what is really going on because they're just so used to obeying their familial and cultural directives. So an orca person with dry eye issues, this is what you need to look at. There's probably something in your life, in your immediate family circumstances, or having to do with your family's rules that's upsetting you, but you can't let yourself see it or feel it because you're afraid of how it would impact your beliefs. You know, your family would get upset with you if you decided to change your mind about something they believe. So, if an orca person is going to act from a place of emotion instead of groundedness, this is usually where it happens. They're confronted with a truth that conflicts what they've been raised to believe, and they defer automatically to the rule, rather than looking at the truth and using that to inform their real-world actions as they normally would. On the other hand, the rare orca person may find themselves drawn to people or things that their family would really, really frown upon. But those may be just the people or things that would reinvigorate their life and that of their family in the long run. So if this is you, this is not to say you should chase after every single rebellious impulse, but that if something outside your family's usual way of being really fascinates or energizes or excites you, it's a good idea to let yourself explore it. You may not want to tell your family about it for a while, because the reaction isn't likely to be good. But even among orca people, it's important to remember you are not your family. You are part of them, but you're still an individual living his or her life. And your individual journey is just as important as the one you make as a family member. 2, all those rules had to start somewhere. So it may be time for some new rules, and you may have to be the person who gets those into place. Lastly, one of the really interesting things about orcas is that they're one of 3 creatures on the whole darn planet in which the females of the species experience menopause. In case you're curious, the other 2 species are, well, us and pilot whales. So what this means is that at a certain point in her life, a female orca stops being able to reproduce, but still has a valuable role to play and many years ahead of her in which to play it. So instead of being endlessly wrapped up in the physical and emotional process of birthing new life, she instead takes on different duties, providing wisdom to her family as a seasoned matriarch. Many of you guys are familiar with the idea of the Maiden, Mother, and Crone, how many pagans who revere female wisdom perceive the stages of a woman's life. It's important here, by the way, to note that you don't have to be a biological mother, to have biological children to be a mother. You can play that role for animals, or for the children of others, or even for the other adults in your area. You can also be a man and play the role of a mother. So this isn't a biologically determined thing here. So for those of you for whom orca is a totem, there are going to be distinct stages in your life, largely based on the way in which you provide guidance and nurturing. So to use the pagan symbolism, when you are the maiden, the child, you will be the one receiving nurturing. Unlike many other folks, orca people don't usually feel that they had to grow up too fast. Their childhoods might not all have been idyllic, but they did have them. And they weren't usually given adult responsibilities at an inappropriate time. So they got to be kids. Then, At a certain point, it becomes pretty darn clear that childhood is over and now you get to be the mother. So you're now the grown-up providing nurturing to the young. Because anything to do with childbearing also has to do with creative expression, as these things are both located in the second chakra. It may also be that at a certain phase of your life, you suddenly become prolific in your creative endeavors. Your whole life becomes consumed with generating creative ideas and nurturing them to fulfillment, just like you would nurture a small child to adulthood. And then the time to be a mother or creator is over, and you are now the crone, teaching other people how to mother or how to create. So you're still providing a nurturing role, but it's less intimate. So if we're talking about creative endeavors, you may stop creating as much yourself and instead begin to teach others how to do what you do. If we're talking about mothering, you're no longer raising your own children, but providing guidance for adults on how to be parents themselves. You're teaching adults how to adult, to use the new terminology, as opposed to trying to figure out how the hell you're going to adult yourself. Now, in humans, when a woman has an especially hard time physically with menopause, this means that on an emotional level, she has issues about moving out of the childbearing phase of her life. The first of these issues tends to be feeling that if she's not mommy, then she doesn't know what her role is anymore. She doesn't know how to feel good about herself if she's not able to base her self-esteem on what she's doing for her children. She has to completely redefine who she is and what makes her feel proud and worthy and fulfilled. The second most likely issue here is resenting the hell out of getting older, believing that aging comes with a loss of love or respect or fun or growth or beauty. So the difference between a woman who barely notices menopause and one for whom it is absolutely rife with miserable physical symptoms is how she feels about this new stage in her life. This can be true for men as well, without the same hormonal component, obviously. One day your kiddos don't need you to be dad anymore, and you're not sure what you're supposed to do with yourself now. Or you feel like you're losing value, respect, attractiveness, or the opportunity for fun or growth as you age. Now, if you're an Orca person, it is really, really important for you to recognize that you have an important role to play in each stage of your life. The crone may not be the epitome of our youth-obsessed culture's idea of beauty, but she has the compassion and wisdom that come from a lifetime of experience. So, when you're in trouble and you really need guidance, you want the person with the experience and sensitivity to deliver that guidance, not the person who's just pretty to look at. You can make an important impact and be loved for it. Every year you walk this earth, if you can stop worrying so much about how you think people see you as you age, and just stay focused on enjoying your life as much as possible, no matter how your life or your body has changed. So I hope this has given you guys a good understanding of Orca, but if you would like further information, I invite you to schedule a professional session with me. I work with people all over the world, thank you Skype, to help you understand the unique messages of your animal totems and spirit guides, and to also help with physical and emotional healing, dream interpretation, figuring out what you're here to do with yourself, and a bazillion other things. I would love to work with you as well. So this is what I do for a living. It's awesome. If you are interested in working with me, you can visit my website, which is www.ravenlightholistichealing.com. It'll tell you exactly what I do, what to expect, what I charge, how to book a session, all that good stuff. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Ravenlight Holistic Healing. Please make sure you look for the business page and not my personal info, because I do not respond to requests on my personal account. And while I understand that you might like my professional opinion on your spiritual situations, you'd like me to answer questions, I don't provide this outside of a professional session. So if you're interested in my opinion or my guidance, please book a session with me. Have a gorgeous day, my darlings. Cheers.